Hi guys, it's Teresa Wassa with RX Physiotherapy, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about your squat stance. Now, somewhere along the line, you've probably heard the notion that we should squat with our feet at shoulder width or maybe slightly outside of shoulder width, and with our feet either straight ahead or angled just a little bit outside. Now, I do think that for most of us, that is a good place to start. However, just like we are all unique snowflakes, so too are our squats. There's a lot of differences in the anatomy from one person to another, and that can play a big role in why someone's squat looks a little bit different than another person's. And if we're all trying to look the same, that's going to be not maximizing our function across the board. We should all squat probably a little bit differently because we're all built a little bit differently. So first and foremost, let's talk about the hip joint. So the hip joint, the socket of the hip joint is formed within the pelvis, and your thigh bone, the femur, comes up and it has kind of a ball on the end of it, and that's going to fit into that hip socket, or we call it the acetabulum. Now, everyone's hip sockets are a little bit different, so the shape of the pelvis can be different. The orientation or the positioning of that hip socket can differ from person to person, and there can also be differences in the femur itself. So that ball, or what we call the femoral head, can come off at different angles. So we call that coxa vara versus coxa valga. And the angulation of the femoral head towards the front of your body or to the rear of your body, that can vary as well. That's what we call anteversion versus retroversion. There can also be differences in terms of your right side versus your left side. So maybe just based on your structure of your hip joint, for instance, it could be that you do better with a squat where your foot is slightly turned out on the right side and straight ahead on the left, or vice versa. Squat width can also be something that can be different for different individuals based on their particular hip anatomy. Ankle anatomy also plays a role, so how much your ankles can bend can influence how you're going to squat. And then the length of our limbs. So if we think about the ratio of our femur or our thigh bone length to our leg bone length, that can also affect what our squat looks like as well. Now, if you have pain or if you're dealing with an injury or you're having some issue with your squat, changing up how you squat can make a difference, beyond alignment and structural things. So we want to think about squatting the best that we can, so we want to optimize alignment to maximize performance, but outside of that there are a number of different things that can affect how we squat, and that gets into a little bit of the psychosocial stuff, a little bit of the pain science stuff. But in any case, if you are having pain or dysfunction with your squat, it's just not feeling it for you, sometimes doing something different can make a world of difference. Sometimes doing something different in terms of your squat stance, your positioning, that sort of thing, can place a little bit of a different load, can kind of change the loading of your tissues, and sometimes that can produce a change in how that squat feels for you. Other times it's just changing the input that's coming into your nervous system, and that can affect the output and how our brain is producing pain when we change those inputs. Sometimes a different neurotag might be elicited versus others that aren't, depending upon how we're moving. It's very complex. There's a lot of different ways, and we don't really know how we're impacting things, but a lot of times just doing something different can affect how we feel in our squat and how we're functioning in our squat. So give it a try, experiment with your squat stance, experiment with the amount of toe out, and basically what you're looking for is the squat that feels the best for you. Can you drop into that squat with a relative ease of movement, less feeling of restriction, and how strong do you feel in that squat? So if you change your squat a little bit and you feel a lot stronger in that position, that's probably a good change for you. And remembering too that change, might not be a change that you're going to keep forever. Sometimes, particularly when there's a pain or an issue that's going on with a squat, that change in your setup or how you drive out of the bottom of your squat, there's a lot of different things that we can play with. That could be a temporary change, and we're going to change that later on. So a lot of things that we can play with. You can experiment with some of this stuff on your own, or you can seek out a physiotherapist such as myself with RX Physiotherapy, or maybe you have a great coach that you can work with and just get a little bit of feedback on that squat and make sure that you're squatting the best for you. All right, guys, thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, please bring them my way. I'd be happy to help any way I can. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.